Just staying on the National Partnership on Homelessness. Can you tell us a little bit more about the $76 million development fund that was part of the transitional partnership agreement, what it's for and where it came from?
In the earlier National Partnership Agreement, there was a development, or something equivalent to the development fund called A Place to Call Home, which was about a housing first strategy to address homelessness. In effect, this is a continuation of that kind of assistance. And largely the applications are in that sort of nature.
All right. Was it intended as something of a carrot to get the states to sign up quickly?
No, it wasn't. It was part of the offer to the states.
Okay. All right. Which states then made bids into the fund? Which states then made bids into that fund? Can you just tell us?
Every state except the Northern Territory.
And that was the list of numbers from each state that Ms Black just read out.
Do you have a sense of why WA was so late to the table?
In terms of
of signing, I beg your pardon, of signing on to the transitional agreement.
We don't have sort of detailed information about why that might be the case, but certainly throughout the whole process we continued close engagement with our state and territory counterparts, reminding them and encouraging them to sign as soon as possible.
It's down to speculation, but it's possible the Western Australian state election may have slowed them down a bit.
There was a spell in the caretaker period. Okay. The Commonwealth Auditor General's report into the National Partnership on Homelessness was fairly damning, pretty stark, and identified that numbers of homeless people are actually rising, and that there's not a lot of transparency at a state or territory level to show what they're contributing or how they're actually meeting the goals. So the recommendation that it made about exploring reporting mechanisms for improved transparency and accountability is the language that they used. Does FACSIA provide a formal reply and advice off the back of a report like that?
Our response to the audit report's actually included in the audit report.
And that's it?
We accepted the recommendations of the Audit Office.
So tell us how you're going to action that recommendation in particular.
In a sense, we noted in responding to the audit report that decisions of government around the one-year transition agreement had already occurred, and we're in the process of that process, that any further national partnership agreement would be informed by the findings of the Commonwealth audit. It would also be informed, as you would be aware, that the state government audit officers are also auditing the National Partnership Agreement on Homelessness from a state perspective, and we're expecting state audits, and collectively that body of audit material would inform both the Commonwealth and the states and territories in how to go forward. Okay.
I'm aware of 4 or 5 state Auditors General reports that you're referring to there.
Yep. There's 5 that's been released to date.
If there's anything consistent that you could take from each of those reports, it would be that some states are passing off business as usual as new measures, and Queensland looks to be a particular offender. How challenging do you think it's going to be to get COAG to agree to report properly and consistently on the impact of the housing instruments, as they've just started to do in the health space, for example?
You're asking me to speculate. I'm not sure I'm able to go there.
Senator, one of the things that we did do even in the transition agreement, because we recognised that, and I think we've spoken about it in this committee before, that one of the issues was actually being very clear about what was being funded through the different agreements. So one of the things that we did do in the Transition National Partnership Agreement was ask for the states and territories to provide us with not only an implementation plan, but with that implementation plan, a list of service providers that they were going to fund
Yeah.
as part of that. Now, it doesn't go as far as, you know, some of the other things that have been in the audit reports, but it's a first step towards recognising that that will give some transparency about exactly what is being funded with the money being made available.
So, Ms Carroll, sorry.
Yeah, go
Ludlam,
ahead.
Ms Carroll, when you say a list of service providers, do you mean a list of service providers which includes detail as to the amount of funding being allocated by the states?
Yes,
Yes.
Senator.
Thank you.
And the location of the service.
The example I raised around health, we apply key performance indicators like emergency department waiting times and elective surgery waiting times to payment of funds. Is there any thinking going in at a Commonwealth level on homelessness to do something similar, like reducing public housing waiting lists or particular metrics?
There's certainly things that the Commonwealth would be looking at in going forward with any longer term agreement. And I think what we would be looking at is how you get about a balance on getting better outcomes, accountability and all of those things. One of the issues that has been raised with us at different times is also the flow through of funds through to service providers, because you don't want service providers, for example, being paid in arrears necessarily.
Yeah.
So it depends how you might pay the states. But there's different mechanisms that you can use through partnership agreements, both reward payments for actually having achieved some of those outcomes, or project-based payments for, you know, delivery of a particular service. But they are things that we definitely will be looking at in terms of any longer-term agreement.
Okay. So recent figures show turnaway rates at homelessness services of about 59 or 60% on any given day, and the figure is 74% for couples with children. Now, the white paper had a goal of halving homelessness by 2020 and then being able to provide services to everyone seeking them. So what's your honest assessment of how we're tracking as a nation on both of those goals?
If I can start with, the white paper has 3 headline targets, which are largely measured by the census.
Yeah.
The first one is around the rate of primary homelessness, rough sleepers, if you will.
Yeah.
We think we're well positioned in terms of the 25% decrease in the rate. The number fell, the rate decreased by 13.5% between the 2006 and 2011 census. The census also showed a decrease in the rate of Indigenous homelessness. Where it's more challenging is the overall homelessness rate has increased by 8% between the 2 censuses, from 45 to 49 people per 10,000 of the population, largely driven by overcrowding and largely driven by the overcrowding statistics.
Yeah.
And that's a much more challenging space for us.
Yes.
And that was the result of a change in the definition of homelessness in the 2011 census, which included
which I spent a fair bit of
severe
time
crowding. Yeah.
complaining about. Yeah.
Senator, one of the things, sorry, if I could just go to as well in terms of the turnaway rates, what the census did show that there had been a 23% increase in people staying in supported accommodation. So it did indicate that while the turnaround rate is still high, that there has been an increase in people that are being supported through supported
So
accommodation.
both things are climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What are the most current figures that you've got for us on turnaway rates?
The most recent figures are the ones released. I'm trying to work if it was December or last year or January this year from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, and they will be updated again at the end of this year.
Okay.
So, Scott,
go ahead.
Senator Ludlam, on the ANAO report, have you got more on that, or may I just ask a couple of questions in that space?
No. Go ahead. I've got a couple more on homelessness more broadly, but finish up.
Yeah, okay. So in the Audit Office report, and I note